We're here at O'Brien's house in Loughglynn, and the O'Briens have lived here for the last 200 years in this house, and this is approximately 500 metres from the place where two men were executed, Sean Bergin and Stephen McDermott, 100 years ago. And we're just going to pop into the cottage now, and so I'm joined here now by Jerry Byrne, who is a grandchild of the O'Briens, and by Bill Kelly, and by Shane Browne. And as you can see here from the cottage, it is as it was 100 years ago. It's fully authentic, and it has been maintained by Jerry and his sister Lena. And as you can see, it is an absolutely gem to have here, a gem to have here in our county. So authentic, and it's certainly a beautiful cottage. So I'm just going to talk now to Bill first about the incidents and what happened here, as he heard himself, which was handed down through the family, about what happened here 100 years ago. And Bill has a local connection here with that. So I'm just going to ask Bill, what is his local connection and what are the memories from his parents and grandparents regarding what happened here 100 years ago in Loughglynn, in the Woodlands of Loughglynn.
Bill Kelly here. My connection with the Woodlands of Loughglynn would be that just across the fields here behind me in Ahaderi was my granduncle Roger's house. The four lads were staying in Roger's house the night before the events in the Woodlands. There was a sing-song in Roger's house the night before, and the four lads were very tired. They went to bed upstairs in the loft, and the following morning, when Roger went out to tend his stock, he saw the Crossley tenders coming down the ride. The ride was a little road that comes from the main road down to Roger's house. He thumped on the ceiling with the hay fork. The boys climbed down out of the loft and made it out the back door. Bergin wasn't in good order, and it slowed their pace, and they only got a few hundred yards till they realised they were surrounded. Toby Scally was hit. He fell into the river, and the boys fought from the river until they finally had to surrender. McDermott and Bergin were court-martialed and executed on the spot after being very, very badly beaten. Satchwell was beaten, but he had served in the First World War, so they told him they were going to bring him to the square in Castlereagh to execute him. Eventually the court-martialed him when he got 15 years penal servitude, which he was serving in Athlone, and when the truce came, he was released. Now, there are many tellings of the stories and of that night, or of that fateful morning, and it is a historic and sad day for the area. They're still fondly remembered and talked about, but the generations that are doing that are sadly moving on as well. So possibly this could be the last second-hand account we'll have. The rest will be in the history books. Roger's daughter, Vera, wrote a book in the 90s, shortly before she died, and she gave a very good account, a full chapter on the events of that day. Um, my Uncle Roger got a very, very hard time from the Tans as well. In fact, he thought he was going to be executed. They shot his hens, they shot his ducks, they shot his goat. He was badly beaten in the house. He thought he was going to be executed and the house was going to be burned down. But they didn't. It was a sad day for Ireland, but it was a great day for Ireland because we can sit here today and talk about it because of what those men did. And they will never be forgotten. The events of that famous day, or infamous day, happened just up across here, a few fields behind us. The bodies of McDermott and Bergin and Joe Scally, who was, or Joe Satchwell, sorry, were brought into Castlereagh that day. In later years, I got to know Toby Scally very, very well. As a child, I sat on his knee many a time, and on my Uncle Roger's knee many a time. That's my family connection with this day in our history, and hopefully it will never be broken.
Bill, their bodies were brought into the RIC barracks in Castlereagh.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. Yes, yes, yes. Legend has it that the Tans were euphoric after their kill that day in the Woodlands, and that all the way from Loughglynn to Castlereagh, they sang "It's a Long Way to Tipperary" in reference to Sean Bergin from Nina. If that song ever came on the radio in our house, the radio was turned off fairly quick, I can tell you that.
I was given this oration by Kathleen Hegarty Thorne about 15 years ago, which accompanied the pistol belonging to Toby Scally. Oration for Toby Scally given by Camden Gerald O'Connor on the 22nd of 2nd, 1971. Before we leave here, my comrades of the old IRA have asked me to speak on their behalf about the man we have buried and the character he was. I've known Toby all my life and can speak intimately of some of the aspects of his character which made him liked and respected by all. Toby joined the National Volunteer Army in 1913. When these divided at the outbreak of the First World War, he followed the Irish Volunteers led by Pádraig Pearse. In 1919, the members of this body took an oath of allegiance to the Republic proclaimed by the first Dáil Éireann, and from then on they were known as the IRA. Toby served in the army until he was taken prisoner in 1923. He was held a prisoner until the end of the Civil War, and after taking part in a long hunger strike, he was released in 1924 and returned home. Soon after, he was offered a job as a postman in Loughglynn, which he accepted and held until he retired a few years ago. Toby was not a wild gunman type that some have imagined. He was an honest, kindly soul with a very good sense of humour, which always made him good company. He never spoke harshly of anybody, and I never heard an ugly word from his lips. He was, by nature, the soldier type. He thought like a soldier, he acted like a soldier, and quite unconsciously he had the carriage and measured step of a well-trained army man. When the Civil War broke out, some of us resigned from the IRA rather than become involved. But for Toby, there was no crisis of conscience. His simple reasoning was that he had sworn an oath to defend the Republic against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And this he did while he was able. We must leave his body now to moulder in the grave. But surely his soul will go marching on, to join the gallant company of comrades who have gone before him. To his sisters and relatives we tender our sympathy, and pray that his soul and the souls of all the faithful departed may rest in peace. Amen.
So as you can see there, this is a photograph here of Sean Bergin, and the reason why Sean Bergin came to Castlerea was because his father was a timberman, and he wanted Sean to learn his trade, and there was some connection with some forestry, I think, down near Ballinagar. And Sean then came up to work in Connolly Brothers in Castlerea, and I'm going to hand over now to Jerry Byrne, who has a catalogue, and he's just going to tell us a little bit what Connolly Brothers was like 100 years ago. Of course, it was a fine facility, wasn't it, Jerry?
It was one of the finest woodworking places. As you can see from the photographs, Paschal, it was absolutely massive. They made everything, every type of furniture you could possibly dream of. They were top quality, top notch, as good as you get in Ireland, and that's why Sean arrived to learn his trade in Castlerea. This is the original 100-year-old catalogue from Connolly Brothers at the time, where Coonies are now at the moment. Everything right down to the final page, which takes in the coffins.
Okay, so we're here in Hell's Kitchen in Castlerea, and I'm here with Shane Browne, and right here in front of us in the glass case is Toby Scally's gun, and Sean received it a number of years ago. Of course, it has been decommissioned, and right underneath it here we have the oration to Toby Scally, which was given by Commandant Gerald O'Connor. So Sean, can you tell us a little bit about Toby Scally's gun and how you came to receive it?
I got it from Pat Vaughan, and I was just looking at the letter he sent me here. I have it 30 years now. Dear Sean, I've mailed Toby's toy today, October 29, 1991, by airmail. You should have it in about 10 days. Make sure you show it to John Costello right away. You have a film that Michael Towie promised me. Will you please send it on to me so that I can have it converted to the video VHS. If you have any other odd pieces that you think I might be interested in, please send them on to me. Please give me a call if you want to talk at this American number. Thank you for everything. Say hello to everyone. Pat Vaughan. Thank you very much, Pat. I was delighted to get this gun. It was actually given to Pat Vaughan, and he brought it to America, and he sent it to me. The only thing is this, that after my time, I'd like to see it being preserved, because it's really a relic of the ambush that took place in Loughglynn in 1921. He had two guns, and I think he got wounded, and he fell into a drain, and he had this gun with him. I think he spent 2 days there, actually, at that time. He was buried in 1971, and I'm delighted from Kathleen Thorne, who gave me the oration given over his grave. It's a bit long to give it over the air now, but it's great. The bullets actually up there are not really bullets, they're actually dummies.
Sean, you also have here a photograph of Sean Bergin, and you've had this here in the bar in Hell's Kitchen. Sean, how did you acquire it? Lovely photograph. How did you acquire it? And tell us a little bit about it.
I got this photograph from Pat Vaughan at the same time. And actually, when I went to school in Sligo, and I remember there was a wholesaler there called Stephen Bergin. I got to know him. And you're talking about the best part of 50 years ago, and he was still operating out of Sligo. And you'd often see his van coming up here, delivering stuff around Castlerea with Stephen Bergin written up on the side of it. He was a brother of Sean here, that was actually shot in the Loughglynn. And on the bottom of it here, I just read this for you. It says, the late Sean Bergin, Nina. This came from Nina. OC, the Flying Column, 1st Battalion, South Roscommon Brigade IRA, killed in action in Loughglynn Woods, the 19th of April, 1921.
Of course, Sean, also, we might as well mention here as to why Sean Bergin came to Castlerea, and I know that Jerry Byrne is here with me as well, and of course Jerry, being a timberman, would know all about this. Sean Bergin, I believe, came up to work in Connolly's Brothers. Is that right, Sean?
Oh, that's right. Connolly's was a very extensive timber yard here and all. One of the biggest business. We remember as youngsters, Tommy Connolly, he was the last surviving member here, and the business was sold over to Willie Scahill and Tom Donlan and Mickey Morris at that time.
I'm here now with Alan Byrne, and Alan's grandparents lived in this house here. And Alan, I'm sure you're very, very proud of the house and the legacy that's going to be passed on to you and your family.
Yes, Paschal, I am indeed. I suppose I'm the fifth generation to be walking down through those fields. And as a child, I remember actually getting water from the well over there and bringing it up to my grand-uncle Tatey in this very house. Obviously, I feel it's important now to listen to these old fellas in here, and they're passing on their stories and about the past. So I can pass it on to my own kids, the sixth generation who actually come down here as well, and hopefully it'll be remembered for generations to come.
Okay, so I'm here with Pat Dockery from Clonbonov, and we're here at the moment just outside Clonbonov Church, and we know that Sean Bergin was brought here to a house next door, which has since been demolished, and it was belonged to Micheál O'Callaghan, who was a teacher here. I'm just going to talk to Pat about that. We're going to just then talk about and go and see where this warming room was, which was referred to, and also where Nurse Coll's house was. Pat, over to you.
Okay, well, we're looking now at the site of the teacher's residence, not the present house we're looking at. It was a teacher's residence, a two-storey residence, but that residence was demolished before the present house was built, and Mr. Bergin was being cared for in that house for a while, but they were worried that the Black and Tans might be onto it, so he was moved to the warming room, or as it was referred to, the furnace behind the church, which I remember being there myself many years ago. It was there till 1984 before it was covered in. So we're approaching the site of that now. If we come across here, actually the old furnace is probably still down there under the church. The entrance to that was here, and you went down a flight of steps and you came to a long passageway which was here, and you went along the passageway, and you can still actually see a little space. That is actually where the furnace was, and that's where Bergin would have been cared for by a local woman called Margaret Call, later Margaret Munrenell. And Margaret Call came from a house just behind the church, which you can see now, or partly see. The house is presently occupied by a descendant of Mrs. Munrenell's, and she later became Margaret Munrenell, and she moved from the house you can see now to a house about a mile up the road. As I said, I remember Margaret Munrenell because her and my own late mother, Maureen Hanley at the time, Dockery, were good friends, and my mother used to often go up to visit Mrs. Munrenell. So, as I said, she lived to be well into her 90s.
I'm here in Brackloon in Ballinagar, and this is the homestead of the McDermotts, and this is the original house where Stephen McDermott was born. And just down the road there, about 500 metres away, was the local school where he went to school. And as you can see, the old sheds are still here. And I'm just going to go into the house now, and I'm going to talk to Willie and Annie McDermott. And Willie is a nephew of the late Stephen McDermott, who was shot in the Woodlands of Loughglynn on the 19th of April, 100 years ago. So I'm just popping in here now to say, how you, Willie? Just, we're going to have a look here here's a photograph that was taken of Stephen, and here's some memorabilia that was presented to Willie and Annie 50 years ago. So we also have here a stone that was presented to the McDermott family, and this was presented by the Loughglynn Gortigani Lissacull Historical Society in memory of Stephen. And Willie, thanks for talking to me this evening here, Willie. Stephen was an uncle of yours, and he was an uncle of yours. So I'm just going to chat a little bit. Willie, can you just tell us your memories from your father, who was Stephen's brother, and from your grandparents about what happened to your uncle? So I'm just going to hand you the mic.
I'm Willie McDermott, Bracklin Castlereagh. I'm a nephew of Stephen McDermott, who was shot in Loughglynn. He was born to my grandmother and grandmother, Patrick and Jean McDermott. On the 19th, he was shot on the 19th of April, 1921. He lived this house. I'm the last generation of the McDermotts living in this house. He went to Tully School, and from Tully School, he joined the Free State to make Ireland a Free State country. All I know is from my father and my grandmother. That's all the memories I have of him. He had two sisters who went to America way back in the 30s, and he had a brother in England and my father, and that was the family that was reared in Bracklin Castlereagh.
And Willie, just one final thing. Your uncle, Stephen McDermott, he's buried in Bastick Cemetery, is that right?
My uncle Stephen is buried in Bastick graveyard, and that's where all my family is buried, my mother and father, and the family is buried, and the headstone is up there in Bastick.
Well, Willie, thanks very much, and Annie, thanks very much for talking to us. And this is Tully School, and this is the school where Stephen McDermott went to school as a young lad, and it's only about 500 metres away from his home house. So school is closed now for about 30 years, but this is where Stephen went to school, just here in Tully. Right, so we're here at the grave of Stephen McDermott in Bastick Cemetery, and it's exactly 100 years ago since Stephen was shot in the Woodlands of Loughglynn. And I'm here with three men from the local area here, Pádraig Hester, Sean Raftery, and I'm also here with John Martin. And John is going to tell us a little story about Stephen and how he acquired a specific gun. And the story was told to John from his father. So John, can you just tell us the story there about what your father told you?
My father often told the story that he went into Tom Cattle's in Finchbark. Tom Cattle was a butcher in Finchbark who had been a policeman in Liverpool. And one day at a black and tan, a fair day in Finchbark, a black and tan came into Cattle's, and he was drunk. And he seemingly pulled a revolver. He was throwing his weight about, and he pulled out a revolver. And Tom Cattle disarmed him and gave him a kick up behind and threw him out of his house. Some time later, my father was in Cattle's, and Tom Cattle gave the revolver to my father. My father brought it home, and later on he gave the revolver to Stephen McDermott. And he always said that that was the revolver that Stephen McDermott had in the Woodlands when he was murdered in the Woodlands of Loughglynn.
We're here at the site of my Uncle Roger's house, the house where the boys stayed that fatal night. This was the entrance here into the house. Just down there, about 2 fields, you can see the woods there all around. There's a little field there surrounded by the woods. That's the field where they were shot, court-martialed, or whatever you want to call it, and executed. And they had to be taken out and down. This little road up here is what was called the Ride, still called the Ride. And down that road is where the cross-sea tender came on that fatal morning. This was my grandmother's home place here, and there was another little house up there where her sister was married and had children up there as well, Manions. We're here on this beautiful spring morning, 2021, and 100 years ago, this is the spot where Bergin and McDermott were executed. Toby Scally lay on the ditch of a drain, down there wounded, left for dead. And Joe Satchwell was they were all very badly beaten here before McDermott and Bergin, with a make-up court-martial, were shot dead. It's 100 years since. Let's hope it's never forgotten.